The funeral of Arthur Calloway is attended by 214 people, which is the number that his widow Clara counts from the second pew, not because she is the kind of person who counts things at funerals, but because counting is one of several small, specific techniques she has developed across 30 years of marriage for maintaining the quality of attention required to be fully present in rooms that she finds, for various reasons, professionally demanding. She is 63 years old. She is wearing the black dress she bought for her mother's funeral 11 years ago, and that still fits because Clara Calloway has, across 30 years of marriage to a man who preferred her appearance to reflect a specific idea of what a successful man's wife should look like, quietly maintained the same dress size through the specific discipline of someone who has many reasons not to let other people control the things they can still control for themselves. She looks very sad. She is very sad. She is very sad. She is very sad. These are not mutually exclusive with the other things she is. She looks at the people in the pews. She knows all 214 of them. She knows, specifically, which ones are here because they loved Arthur Calloway, which ones are here because they feared him, which ones are here because they owed him something, which ones are here because they are hoping his death has changed the terms of what they owed him, and which three people in particular. She has located all three within the first 12 minutes, which is a personal record, are here because they had a specific and ongoing relationship with Arthur that they are hoping his death has made permanently private. It has not. Arthur Calloway's death has made nothing permanently private, because his wife has spent 30 years ensuring that nothing would be permanently private if it came to that, and it has come to that, and Clara Calloway, 63, sitting in the second pew looking very sad in the dress she bought for her mother's funeral, is ready. She had been a financial analyst when she met Arthur Calloway, 28 years old, rigorous, with a specific kind of mind that processes large amounts of information, and identifies the patterns that connect disparate data points into coherent pictures, a skill that would make her excellent at the 30 years of work she was about to undertake. Arthur Calloway was charming. This is the first and most important fact about him, because everything else about him was organized around the charm. The way it created access and goodwill and the specific institutional amnesia of people who like someone enough to stop asking questions about them. Clara had understood the gap between the public Arthur and the private Arthur within 2 years of marriage. She had considered leaving. She had made a calculation, not coldly, not without cost, but with the specific clear-eyed honesty of someone who assesses what is true and makes decisions on the basis of what is true rather than what they would prefer to be true. What she had decided was this: she would stay. She would be an excellent wife, because being an excellent wife was the specific form of cover that allowed her to be present in every room where Arthur's business operated. And being present in every room was how she would understand, completely, what she was staying inside, and she would keep records, not for any immediate purpose, not with any plan that extended further than the next document or the next observation. She kept records the way she had kept records as a financial analyst, because information has value in proportion to how well it is organized, and because organized information, held by a person with no apparent reason to hold it, is the most powerful asset a person can have in a situation whose exact future shape they cannot predict. 30 years, 214 people at the funeral, 3 of them specifically. She has everything. She knew about the first account in 1998, 4 years into the marriage, when Arthur came home from a trip to the Cayman Islands with a specific quality of relaxation that she had learned to read as the relaxation of a resolved financial arrangement rather than a vacation. She did not confront him. She made a note of the timing, the trip, the subsequent change in Arthur's financial behavior that she was watching with the trained eye of someone who spent 4 years analyzing balance sheets before she married one. She knew about Catherine Marsh in Hanging Kumchamleba. 8 years in she watched, she noted, she continued being an excellent wife at every event where excellence was required. She knew about the second account, in the Isle of Man, in Haingin Kongchumlebay. She knew about the arrangement with Martin Graves, the city planning commissioner, in Haingin Kongchumlechin. She knew about it specifically because she had been in the room when the arrangement was discussed with a looseness that the presence of wives at dinner parties reliably produced in men who had decided that wives at dinner parties were furniture rather than witnesses. She had been the furniture. She had heard everything. She had noted everything. She knew about Rachel Chen in Haingin Kongchumlebon, not a casual arrangement. She understood from the way Arthur managed his schedule around her. Rachel Chen was a real estate agent, smart, genuinely liked Arthur, did not know he was married in any sustained believing way, a form of ignorance that Arthur had cultivated carefully and that Clara found, upon investigation, not something she could be angry at Rachel Chen for. She had kept everything. The accounts, the arrangements, the women, the commissioner, the 7 other instances of financial creativity that crossed the line from aggressive to illegal. She had kept everything in a format that was, by the time Arthur died, complete, organized, and immediately deployable. The week after the funeral reveals the exact shape of what Arthur Calloway left behind. On Tuesday, Arthur's business partner Geoffrey Holt arrives with flowers and condolences and a specific quality of purpose underneath the condolences. The quality of someone who has come to assess, rather than to comfort. He offers, in 90 minutes, his personal sympathy, a business proposal, and in the specific way of someone who has rehearsed how to make this sound casual. A mention that he would be happy to help manage the review of Arthur's personal financial holdings, and that there was no need to involve external advisors at this stage. Clara thanks him. She says she will take it under consideration. She sees him out. On Wednesday, a call comes from Martin Graves, now retired from the Planning Commission, who asks whether Clara has had the opportunity to review Arthur's files and whether there is anything in those files she has questions about. Clara says she has been focused on immediate family matters. She thanks him. She hangs up. On Thursday her son James arrives and says, "Mom, Dad's lawyers called me. They said there's some complexity in the estate." He looks at her with the specific concern of a son who has always believed his mother was the gentler, softer, less worldly of his parents. "Are you going to be okay with all of this?" Clara looks at her son. "Ima going to be fine," she says. "But I need you to know something before we meet with the lawyers. Your father was many things. I loved him, and that's true, and it's complicated, and you're going to feel both of those things about him yourself for a long time. But there are some aspects of his business dealings that are going to come to light in the estate process, and I want you to hear about them from me before you hear about them from lawyers or from anyone else." James is very still. "How much do you know?" He says, "Everything," she says. "I know everything." Elena, the daughter, arrives Thursday evening, 31 and a family lawyer, and sits across the kitchen table with the specific quality of someone who arrived to support a grieving mother and has encountered, instead, a situation considerably more complex than grief. Clara has, by the time Elena arrives, told James the essential architecture, the accounts, the arrangement with Graves, the nature of the business decisions, and the documentation she has kept. Elena listens with the dual attention of a daughter and a lawyer. When Clara finishes, Elena says, "How long have you had this documentation?" The earliest dated entry is from Moknan Chinchin Chumchin Mitam. The most recent is from 11 months ago. 11 months ago, Elena says. "Your father was not unwell for only the last few months. His cardiologist had been concerned for some time. I began thinking seriously about contingencies approximately 2 years ago, and before 2 years ago, I was thinking about contingencies less seriously," Clara says. "But I was always thinking about them." Elena looks at her mother, at a woman she has known for 31 years, as the quieter presence in a household organized around her father's energy. The person who managed the dimensions while Arthur managed what the world saw. She is looking at her mother as if seeing, for the first time, that those two descriptions do not fully overlap and that the gap between them contains something substantial. Mom, what are you planning to do with it? That depends on what various people decide to do in the next several weeks. I have no interest in prosecution for its own sake. I have considerable interest in the children of this family not inheriting liability for decisions they didn't make. And if those various people decide to do things that put James and me at risk, then I have documentation that clearly establishes a timeline of when decisions were made and by whom, and that clearly establishes that neither of you had knowledge of or involvement in those decisions. Elena is quiet for a moment. You've been protecting us, she says. Evie been keeping records, Clara says. What they protect depends on what they're needed for. On the Monday after the funeral, Clara asks Geoffrey Holt to come back to the house. She receives him again in the sitting room. She offers tea. She does not pour it immediately. Geoffrey, she says, I want to be direct with you, because I think we've known each other long enough that directness is a more efficient use of our time than the alternative. Geoffrey Holt looks at her with the specific wariness of someone who came prepared for a version of this conversation, and is not yet sure whether the version he is encountering is the one he prepared for. Evie reviewed Arthur's files, she says. I have a reasonably complete picture of the business's financial arrangements, including the arrangements that were structured through the Cayman entity and the Isle of Man holding and the specific transaction pattern from Hangin Kongchamle Chin to Hangin Kongchamle Bai that involved the Planning Commission. Geoffrey Holt is very still. I want you to understand that my interest in these arrangements is not prosecutorial. I am 63 years old. I have just buried my husband, and what I am interested in is a clean resolution of the estate that protects my children's interests, and does not require anyone to spend the next several years in a process that would be expensive and unpleasant for everyone. She places a document on the table. Geoffrey Holt has known Clara Calloway for 22 years. He has spent 22 years watching Arthur treat Clara with the specific affectionate condescension of a man who considers his wife a lovely addition to his professional environment. He has spent 22 years forming an impression of Clara Calloway, that is, he is now understanding with the specific discomfort of someone whose model of a situation has just been comprehensively revised, significantly incomplete. Where did he starts? Evie been paying attention, Clara says. For 30 years, the element of what Clara knows that she has not shared with anyone is what she knows about Rachel Chen. She has known about Rachel Chen since Hangin Kongchamle Bon, what she discovered in Hangin Kongchamle Chin, and has spent 6 years sitting with and deciding what to do with, is that Rachel Chen had a daughter. A girl named Lily, born in Hangin Kongchamle Sao, 10 years old. Arthur Calloway's biological child. Rachel Chen did not tell Arthur. Clara knows this because she spent a year working out whether Arthur knew, with the specific careful investigative attention of someone who needed the answer to be definitive before she did anything with the question, and she arrived at the conclusion. From his behavior, from the financial record, from the absence of any indication in the accounts she monitored, that Arthur did not know. On the Friday after the funeral, Clara calls Rachel Chen. Rachel answers on the second ring with the specific quality of someone who has been waiting for this call without knowing when it would come. Miss Chen, my name is Clara Calloway. I believe you knew my husband. A silence. Yes, Rachel says. Her voice is careful. I'm calling because I want you to know several things, and I want you to hear them from me rather than from a lawyer. The first is that I know about Lily. I have known for 6 years. I want to be clear that I am not calling to threaten you or to involve you in the estate proceedings in any way you don't choose. A longer silence. The second thing is that Arthur did not know about Lily, as far as I have been able to determine. He didn't, Rachel says. I didn't tell him. I know, I understand the decision you made. I'm not calling to revisit it. Then why? Because Lily is Arthur's daughter, and because she has a legal standing in his estate, that the estate process may eventually surface whether or not either of us does anything. I would rather you know that, and be able to prepare for it, and have the ability to make your own decisions about it, than discover it through a process that doesn't have your interests in view. Why are you doing this? Clara thinks about this. Because you made a hard decision alone. You made it intelligently, and with the information you had. You deserve to make the next decision the same way, with the full information, and for yourself. The estate of Arthur Calloway, reviewed by the family's lawyers and subsequently by a forensic accountant retained by Clara's attorney, takes 3 months to organize into a picture that is complete enough to act on. The picture, when complete, is the picture that Clara has been looking at for 30 years. The line holds. The documentation Clara provides, her parallel records, her contemporaneous notes, the specific timestamps and transaction logs, is sufficient to establish, to the satisfaction of the lawyers on both sides, and eventually to the regulatory body that becomes involved in Tahai Nguyen Kong Chum La Chin Planning Commission matter, that James and Alina Calloway had no knowledge of or involvement in the arrangements that created the estate's complications. Geoffrey Holt reaches a settlement. It is the settlement that the documentation Clara brought to the sitting room made available as the most efficient alternative to a substantially more expensive process. He is not prosecuted. The specific decisions about what the documentation is used for are Clara's to make, and she makes them with the specific interest she articulated, a clean resolution that protects her children. Martin Graves, who is 71 and retired and who is primarily a person who made a bad decision in Haining Yin Kong Chum Lechin, is given information that allows him to make an informed decision about his own exposure. He cooperates with the regulatory review and accepts a civil finding. The accounts in the Cayman Islands and the Isle of Man are incorporated into the estate and distributed according to the will. Rachel Chen and Lily are not part of the estate proceedings. This is a choice that Clara makes. What remains, after the estate is settled, is a house on a street where Arthur Calloway lived for 30 years, and a woman of 63 who knows everything that happened in that house, and who is, now that the deployment phase is complete, learning what a life looks like when it is organized around something other than the specific ongoing project of watching and recording, and waiting. Alina asks her mother, in the month after the estate settles, whether she is angry. Clara thinks about this question for a long moment before she answers. I was angry, in the beginning, in the first years, when I was still working out what I was deciding to do. But anger is a high-energy state. You can't maintain it for 30 years without it becoming something else. What it became, for me, was attention. I put the anger into the watching. I put the watching into the documentation. And the documentation was quieter than anger. More useful, is that healthy? Alina says. I don't know. I think it was what I had available. I'm not sure health was the relevant framework. What was the relevant framework? Survival, Clara says, and then, once survival was established, something like presence. Being fully present in the life I was actually in, rather than in the life I would have preferred to be in. Arthur was real, the marriage was real, the children are real, the things he did are real, the things he did are real. I didn't want to live in the comfortable version of the story. I wanted to live in the actual one. Alina looks at her mother. Did you ever think about leaving? Yes, many times. I chose not to each time. I won't tell you the reasons were purely strategic, they weren't. I stayed because parts of the marriage were worth staying for, and because I believed that what I was building was more valuable than the version of the story where I left and lost access to the information I needed to protect you and James. Alina is quiet. Mom, what do you want now? Not what you were building toward. What do you want? Clara sits with this question. It is the question she has not been asked. I want to find out what Ima like when Ima not watching anything. When there's nothing to document. When I can just be in a room without making an inventory of it. Even never really done that. I'd like to try. 14 months after Arthur Calloway's funeral, Clara Calloway is living in the same house, having decided, against the advice of several people who believed she should start somewhere new. That the house is hers and that she built the domestic life it contains across 30 years of genuine effort, and that beginning somewhere new would involve leaving things behind, and she is not interested in leaving things behind. She is not keeping records anymore. She volunteers twice a week at a legal aid clinic, which is Eleanor's doing. Clara walked in and understood within the first hour that what legal aid clients needed was the specific quality of organized attention that she had, and that nobody had told them they were going to receive from a volunteer. She helps people understand what they're looking at. She helps them organize what they know. She is very good at this. James visits monthly and asks questions about his father that are different from the questions of the immediate aftermath. Not what did he do but who was he, which is a different question with a different answer. Clara answers honestly and with the specific care of someone who understands that a child's relationship to a parent is not the same as a spouse's to the same person, and that the truth she holds is not the only truth about Arthur Calloway. Only the most complete one. Rachel Chen sent the photograph. It arrived by text, unannounced, on a Sunday morning, a 10-year-old girl at a kitchen table, working on mathematics, completely absorbed. Clara looked at it for a long time. She has not deleted it. She has not responded yet. She is thinking about what to say, and she is taking the time she needs to think about it, which is something she is learning to do. She sits in the house on a Tuesday morning in November, 14 months after the funeral, with coffee and no inventory and nothing to document, and the specific strange luxury of a day that belongs entirely to itself and to her. She has spent 30 years learning how to carry things. She is spending now learning how to set them down. She is discovering, also a skill, one that takes practice, one that she is, at 63, only just beginning.